Rizvi Hassan is an architect based in Bangladesh who has completed a number of projects in his home country. And one of the most notable one recently is a collection of buildings at a Hindupara Rohingya refugee camp. And Hindupara community is a minority group amongst Rohingya refugees who are now living in the world's largest refugee camp in Kutopalong. Rizvi's practice shows a social or a community aspect in architecture that I don't think we've discussed before in this show, like community building, community empowerment, and involvement with the tools that the architect provides. I think this is what Rizvi calls architecture in a wider spectrum, which we will discuss later. But yeah, really looking forward to learning more about it in this conversation. So thank you so much, Rizvi, for being here.
Hi, Karina. Thank you for having me here and inviting me in this discussion. As you said, I try to look architecture in a broader spectrum, and I'll definitely try to clear that answer in this discussion.
Yeah, no, it is wonderful that you use architecture as a tool to help others through your
Yes.
community center in Hindupara Rohingya Refugee Camp project.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us how you first came across the project or what was the first intention?
Yes. So I have been working with a few non-governmental organizations in this region for a while, and firstly, I was engaged in this context to design some administrative buildings mainly. Then I came to know the camp, the character of the people, the culture here. I tried to understand what they're going through and what is needed mostly. So what I found out here is that there was an emergency phase in this context in the refugee camp. And from that phase, it's now transitioning in a development phase, I must say. So the development phase in a refugee camp is really very different from any other city or any other village. It still has to be temporary, but it's about more organizing the context or more organizing the people's behavior or working with their psychology or conserving their culture. Main issues are here is that they lost their identity, they're refugees, and they struggle with preserving their culture mainly. So uh, when I was working with these organizations, they were proposing these different ideas. If we can like offer an cultural center or community center, or what they can actually gather and maybe come together and take a break and uh, talk about their previous culture and what can be forward. So yeah, I found out these proposals were going on, and where architecture was not very much first intention, but mostly they work with psychology of the people, or how can they be benefited in other ways. So I try to convince these sectors or these people that okay, maybe we can design this community center that can the place can hold the culture itself. So yeah, the intention started from that in this particular context, and we came up with this few projects that tried to identify their identity mainly actually. Yeah, that's pretty much how we started working here. And we had to like go through a lot of projects, a lot of surveys to understand what they need or what is the actual need. So from that we came up with the idea that okay, maybe the build space or build structure is important here, but it can be a tool, as you said, as you mentioned, to connect the people mainly, the most that they need right now, to have them there and to engage them in the process to understand what is they're going through.
Wow. The first intention or the brief was to actually to create a behavior and still some
Yes.
identity, and so it's a behavior flow thing. Then you sort of approach it from an architecture point of view.
Yes.
How big was the site? I mean, yes, it is like a refugee camp, but
Yes.
it's like a community, like a complex on its own, right?
Yes, So in this particular project, we got lucky to have a bigger site. Actually, it was like I must say, how much was it? 400 square meter, I think. The site, and we built like 200 square meter of the area. In other camps, the sites are very dense or very short. You don't get a much bigger space. So we tried to experiment in this particular project a scheme that is very concentrated rather than dispersed or fragmented. It usually doesn't take a lot of space. So we tried to come up with a scheme that can be used to build any kind of space, any required space. Maybe you need a 10 feet by 10 feet room, or maybe you need a bigger hall, and you can assemble these modules or modular partitions that can actually make any kind of space you want. So yeah, the Hindupara Refugee Community Center was pretty much concentrated, I must say. And if you have followed some previous experiments or projects, those are safe spaces for women and girls. We try to focus on creating spaces, wider spaces, interior courts, and everything. Yeah, but as I said, that the camp is entering into a development phase, and every day the land scarcity is an issue here. So yeah, we had to come up with this scheme that can be built in any need or any city.
That's great. Yeah. So if it is for the people and they were already there, were the
Yes.
people involved in the project in somehow, maybe in the landscaping or maybe during the construction also?
So yeah, that was pretty much the idea, to engage them in every phase of the construction, pre-phase of the construction and after construction. We tried to figure out how we could engage them. Because they always don't take us positively, or they always don't feel very comfortable working with us. So we had to plan this in a way that they can be engaged in the pre-construction phase, the during construction phase, and the after construction. Before construction, we were like trying to understand their ideas or their stories or the culture they had gone through, or the previous culture they have lived in. So during that phase, it was pretty much knowing each other. And during the construction phase, the masons were like, okay, we were there on site, and we were experimenting with this and that, with different materials on what can be done, what can be the how the partition can be designed, how the roof can be, and how the patterns of the floors can be. And the masons are pretty much there all the time, and they pretty much dominated what should be the final outlook or the final design. And it was pretty much a collaboration. And when there was something on the site, like there's a shade, there's a structure there, and then the locals and the users and the refugees could get involved, and they came there and shared their ideas, what they're thinking about it, how is it going. And it was pretty much then when we tried to engage them with like the other layers of the design, like landscaping and painting the walls, and the painting the screens and everything. So when they were involved, it was pretty much exciting for everyone, because it was a lot of things going on. Like they're trying these, we should do these and we should do that. So they were like divided in separate groups, and they listed some plants, the name of the plants that is particularly important for Hindu culture, for their festivals, that they can be that can be planted in the compound, and that will be useful further. And there were like these groups of host community and these groups of refugee community, and they collaborated the wall paintings. So it was pretty much like a beautiful event, or beautiful sight to see them collaborating and creating the patterns and coloring the screens. So yeah, it was very exciting for us too.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I think the effect is not only do they learn something new, but they also take like ownership on top of that trust that
Yes.
you built over time, right?
Yes. Yes.
Can you also talk about maybe the low impact materials for the construction or the simple
Yeah.
architecture that you use for this project?
In our experience, the camp is going through a lot of constructions and a lot of works. Different organizations are like investing a lot of money and trying to figure out what should be the scheme that is temporary, but still it can enhance the quality. Often in many other projects, it's the bamboo structures that are being built, or the steel structures that are being built. Those always don't come up with the perfect solution or the good solution that can be maybe relocated if necessary, or maybe reused if necessary, because the camp is very unpredictable. Policies changes, and structures like they gets relocated very often. So yeah, so material was a vital consideration here too, because we didn't want to think our effort as a wastage. Maybe after a couple of years, if it needs to be relocated, it can be relocated. So we tried to figure out what should be the right material from that can be found nearby, and that can be availed by the community if further needed, because in the long run they are gonna repair it and they're gonna maintain it.
Right.
So we came up with the idea that okay, minimum steel can be proposed, as we do not often get treated bamboos here. We do not have that facility yet. That treated bamboos, if we could avail the treated bamboo that is harvested directly from the source, we could like go for the bamboos. Okay, that's the best solution. But since that is not very much available right now, we went for steel and muli bamboo infill. The partitioning, the muli bamboo that can be harvested like in another year in the
Yeah.
site, in the very on site. So yeah, that was the pretty much idea, that designing the modules or flat pack system that has to do with the ideal sizes or the sizes of the materials found nearby, and they can easily follow it and maybe uh, make their own homes or own shelters with these too.
Cool.
uh,
That's great.
yes.
So maybe let's talk about you as an architect. What has this project taught you about your approach to architecture or about architecture itself?
uh, what I found out in this context particularly, or I think in any rural context, the construction process can be considered as an event. We often maybe perceive architecture as the final product or the final spaces or the final photos, but the whole process, maybe designing the structure or building the structure with them, and trying to figure out with them what is the right thing to do and what is adaptable to them. And the whole construction process, if you consider it as an event, a lot of things, many people are engaged here. They share their ideas, ideologies, and knowledges and everything. Uh, and what is more important is that a lot of masons are engaged in this difficult job, in this difficult construction job, and they get back to their home at night or at evening, right? So it should be our consideration that maybe the work through the whole day, this can be enjoyable, they can learn something from it, and they can be developed through the process, rather than they're providing a service and going back to home. We try to set this system or process that they can be developed further. And it quite happened because after a few constructions of different community centers and different projects, they were excited more about like making the things better, making it more crafty. They were even dominating us. Like, okay, I will design the roof. You don't have to worry. You don't have to visit. You just can't. You just can visit the site next week. You will see what I do. It got into them, and they started building that attitude. What happens there is that maybe we focus on one or two or three projects, but there are a lot of constructions, a lot of environment designing going on every time, every day. So when they grow their attitude of like building something beautiful or making a crafty space, they try to implement it everywhere, even in their home, even in their own veranda or in their kitchen. They try to make their life quality a little bit better. So yeah, to me, the biggest learning was that the process should be considered in this type of projects, especially if you are working with a community or a space that has to do a lot of many things to do with a lot of people. You should like consider how you are building it and with what you are building it. Is this handcrafted? Is this possible with like local tools? Is it possible with local knowledge? And maybe you are you teaching them to create something a little bit more better with what they have in hand? So because you can do a lot of things here. You can hire a construction firm that will build the space for you, and it will be a beautiful space if you want. But rather than that, I find this more successful because the process has to do a lot of things with them.
Yeah, it is often overlooked, yeah, especially if architects, if they're already set with wanting the building to look like this or wanting the site to
Yes.
look like a certain thing, then they will do any means to achieve that and like forget about the process, especially the feedback process that was like very valuable, right? Not only
Yes.
in educating the people that do it, but
Yes.
eventually it's like a domino effect where they will also be doing this positive stuff to their own environment. So it is like an educational process, you would say. So
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
building their education, and then this
Yes.
gets amplified to other people also.
Yes, because we came to know these local people from here, and they were sharing like what they needed in life. I asked them like, you have a beautiful village, you have a beautiful land, you can see the hills from your home. What else do you need? So they were saying that uh, they were lacking the education. I mean, no one was for there for them, and maybe teaching their children something, or maybe nobody is letting them know how the life should be, or nobody is acknowledging or creating any appreciation for them. So yeah, the education and being there for them is very important in this context, because they have pretty much everything with them. Like they have these lands, they're cultivating their own food, they have like beautiful homes, they have beautiful every facilities they have here except education. So they get pretty much insecure about living in the rural context. Maybe they think, okay, we are not in the right place, or we should go to a city or another country maybe. So that creates the imbalance, I think. Um, and yeah, the more you spend your time and your efforts with them, uh, the more they will be confident with time, I think.
That's
Yeah.
very cool. Okay, last but not least, any thoughts on being exposed to different notions or what we said earlier in the intro, architecture in a wider spectrum?
Yeah. Okay. So to me, wider spectrum means keeping the architecture education aside and thinking as a general person. Maybe uh, we often get biased with different ideas that I have to do this in life. to prove myself as an architect, that I have to do maybe some beautiful projects to prove that I am an architect. But life is more wider than that, and you are born as a human being, and you have gone through an education process. You have developed certain skills, but that doesn't mean that you have to do what you have been taught. You can use it as your tool. You can use it for what you are trying to do in the first place, or what you are trying to do that feels right to you. So yeah, that's pretty much I think architecture in a wider spectrum means to me that not thinking as an architect, but as a general person, what should be done for the society. Because I often think that architecture practice shifts its paradigm. Maybe in the last century there was a certain artistic practices or sculpture practices that we appreciated a lot, but it's 2020, and we are facing these emergency situations. The refugee numbers are increasing, and the world is going through some emergency conditions. Maybe it can get worse. So we have to think like normal civilized people, that okay, this is the situation of my society, this is the emergency responses we need to be prepared for. And that's how I see my practices. Like, okay, if I need to do something else rather than architecture, uh, I should be ready for it. And when I have the chance to build something that can add value to the quality of life, we can go for it. And yeah, that will come up with the right thing for the right time.
Yeah, that means if you're open, you are also opening yourself up to the bigger impact and a bigger positivity that you project out to the world, right?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's very admirable what you are doing, because again, it shows architecture is not only a profession, but it is also a tool to a bigger community, to empower a community, to involve them in somehow, and also to educate different people with different backgrounds and contributions. So, thank you so much for sharing today.
Yeah, you're welcome.